crisis, if nothing else, should really be the moment that anyone who calls themselves a leader says they're going to put politics aside and put the people first. People are in desperate need of support right now, and playing political games with this moment in these crisis situations, these are the height of emergency situations, is just utterly irresponsible, and it is selfish, and it is about political gamesmanship instead of doing the job that you took an oath to do, which is to put the people first.
Madam Vice President.
And I've been in touch with both FEMA and the president, as well as marshaling all our state agencies and working to support our local communities. And so for Kamala Harris to try to say that my sole focus on the people of Florida is somehow selfish is delusional. She has no role in this. In fact, she's been vice president for 3.5 years. I've dealt with a number of storms under this administration. She has never contributed anything to any of these efforts. And so what I think is selfish is her trying to blunder into this. No. And here's the thing. She has no role. No, she has no role in this process. I'm in contact with the President of the United States. I'm in contact with FEMA director. I'm obviously managing all our state agencies. We're supporting all our local government. And I will say this. I've had storms under both President Trump and President Biden, and I've worked well with both of them. She's the first one who's trying to politicize the storm, and she's doing that just because of her campaign. She's trying to get some type of an edge. She knows she's doing poorly, and so she's playing these political games. I don't have time for political games. I've got people whose lives are on the line. I've got people whose homes and their possessions are on the line, and we are focused 100% on that mission. I'm not worried about playing her political games. And so she is being selfish by trying to blunder into this when we're working just fine.
Look who's playing president of the United States. Kamala Harris has been in office for almost 4 years, and yet now she wants to make her presence known. Up until now, most people didn't even remember she was the vice president of the United States. You never even heard her voice. You'd never see her on camera because she didn't do anything. Now, as Ron DeSantis said, he hasn't heard from the VP during this entire time. The only difference now is that we're very close to the 2024 presidential election. This has changed her tune completely. She's now doing interviews left and right while taking softball questions after softball question. She's never going to do an actual interview because she's just unable to function without a teleprompter or a script. But here's what happens when Kamala Harris malfunctions. Now, this is right after Magic Johnson endorses her. Hey guys, I just want to thank you guys so much for hitting the like button for the video. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and sharing these videos on social media. Let's jump in.
Remember his number, 32. Today we got 32 days until the election. So 32 days. 32 days. Okay, we got some business to do. We got some business to do. All right. 32 days. And we know we will do it. And this is going to be a very tight race until the very end. This is going to be a very tight race until the very end. We are the underdog, and we know we have some hard work ahead.
How's that for speaking off the cuff, huh? And did she just say that they were the underdogs? Because she's currently the vice president of the United States. You're the freaking incumbent, for God's sakes. To say that obviously implies that they're losing. She must have seen the internal polls that shows that Donald Trump's leading by a wide margin, contrary to what mainstream liberal media would tell you. And as you guys saw, she's not built for these moments. Oh no, she's not. Which is exactly why it's so surprising to see her destroy her own campaign with a recent guesting on The View.
As vice president, you've worked very closely with President Biden for almost 4 years. He was here on our show, and he said there wasn't a single thing that he did that you could not do. What do you think would be the biggest specific difference between your presidency and a Biden presidency?
Well, we're obviously two different people, and we have a lot of shared life experiences. For example, the way we feel about our family and our parents and so on. But we're also different people, and I will bring those sensibilities to how I lead. For example, I know we're going to talk today, but one of the issues that I'm very focused on is what we do around home health care.
Yes.
I have done a lot of work as it relates to, sadly, but violence against women and children. I care a lot about that. I love our small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me predominantly, but we had what we called a second mother who lived 2 houses down who helped my mother raise us. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. And so the influence of a personal experience will have its impact on the presidency.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
So at this point, Kamala Harris is in between a rock and a hard place. And with this interview on The View, she has most probably given Donald Trump the keys to the White House. She's being careful so as to not antagonize the voter base of President Joe Biden. But at the same time, she has to make people believe that the last 4 years were actually good for the rest of the country. If that wasn't enough, she was also confronted with the truth here. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis confirmed that the vice president didn't even try to call him. Instead, she's going out to say that she can't reach Ron DeSantis and is making it all about politics. Now just watch how she breathes in heavily right as the name Ron DeSantis was brought up. Check this out.
You and Governor DeSantis have been going back and forth, trading jabs over your attempt to check in. And ahead of the storm, you've called him selfish for not taking your calls. Now, he said this morning you've never called regarding any of the storms Florida has had since you've been vice president until apparently now, and called it political. What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, I have called and talked with, in the course of this crisis, this most recent crisis, Democrat and Republican governors. Called, taken the call, answered the call, had a conversation. So obviously, this is not an issue that is about partisanship or politics for certain leaders, but maybe is for others.
This is where wording comes into play. Did you notice how she didn't refute what Ron DeSantis said? Meaning that she hasn't called him within the last 4 years. Years. And now that Hurricane Helene has brought up government response as an issue, she's all over him. It just kind of goes to show the hypocrisy of Kamala Harris. And to make matters even worse, President Joe Biden is apparently, he's doing his best to outshine her at this time.
The governor of Florida has been cooperative. He said he's gotten all that he needs. I talked to him again yesterday, and I said, I said, no, you're doing a great job. It's all being done well. We thank you for it. And I literally gave my personal phone number to call. So I don't know. There was a rough start in some places, but every governor from Florida to North Carolina has been fully cooperative and supportive and acknowledged what this team is doing. And they're doing an incredible job. But we got a lot more to do.
So we are closing in on less than 48 hours away from the projected landfall of Major Hurricane Milton. Now's the time to execute your plan. You do have time to get to a shelter. You have time to evacuate further than that if that's what you want, but that time is running out. As we get into Wednesday, there's no guarantee what the weather's going to be like starting Wednesday morning. You may have a window where it may be safe, but you may not. So use today as your day to finalize and execute the plan that is going to protect you and your family. Know your evacuation zone. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are now quite familiar with their evacuation zone, given what we've gone through in recent weeks. But if you have questions about that, you can visit floridadisaster.org/know to determine if you live in an evacuation zone. And again, a lot of the places on the west coast of Florida that did receive significant storm surge for Hurricane Helene is projected to have even more storm surge from Hurricane Milton.
This while the Biden-Harris administration is being criticized for spending millions on Lebanon and leaving Americans in need.
Afternoon, there's a lot of sniping over the politics of disaster relief. It's part of this year's elections. Lawmakers on the right are torching the administration. They believe the feds were not ready for Helene. This worries leaders as Milton bears down on Florida.
When you talk to the people who are directly affected, they will tell you that this has been an abject failure. FEMA has lost sight of its core mission, I think, in so many cases, and the administration has not shown that they were prepared for this eventuality and this terrible disaster.
There are different budget lines for money which help cities cope with the migrant crisis and disaster aid, but some Republicans believe DHS is focused on resettling illegal immigrants and not on the storms.
Administration seems to have no problem finding money when they want to spend it on their priorities. When they need hundreds of billions of dollars to pay off student loans for graduate students in gender studies programs, they somehow find it. When it's trying to get helicopters to deliver food and water and cellular service and life-saving medicine into these mountain valleys, they somehow can't seem to find the money.
And brace yourselves, guys. Reports are now saying that Hurricane Milton is going to be even worse.
Okay, there's our hurricane. There's the dry air. And look what's happening here. This is the dip coming in the jet stream. So this dip is going to go like that. And that's what's going to drive this up the cone. Folks in the Keys concerned because it looks like it's coming in that direction. But this dip is a very strong dip. It is going to take it up the cone toward the west coast of Florida. Exact angles, no way to know. The other thing is this is a lot of dry air here and strong winds. So what's going to happen? It's going to drive up into the dry air and strong winds. And here we see it on the model. There's the dry air. There's the dip in the jet stream there. There's your hurricane. Okay, so here we go and watch the moisture. And the hurricane's going to push back against that dry air. And you notice what's happening here is it really shifts up to the north. Why is that? Because energy from the north comes in here and powers the left side of the storm, gives it extra energy, and we get this redistribution and some drier air.
Now, the scary part is that they don't even know the hurricane's path until it hits landfall. Can you believe this? And you know there's still debris and wreckage that's left behind by Hurricane Helene, right? Experts say that those could become like missiles with Hurricane Milton. More on that later, so definitely stay tuned, guys. But first, we have to talk about White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre's blow-up in the recent White House press briefing. Now, it all started with a very simple question. Fox News reporter Peter Doocy asked Karine Jean-Pierre to explain why the Biden-Harris administration had nearly $157 million at the ready to assist displaced people and refugees in Lebanon, but needs to beg Congress for additional funding for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, aka FEMA, as they're facing a shortfall in the aftermath of the devastation brought by Hurricane Helene. Well, Jean-Pierre instantly went on the defensive and called the question disinformation, misinformation, and labeled it dangerous. It's a pretty straightforward question if you ask me. So when Peter Doocy followed up with a question about what the lack of additional funding for FEMA, noted by President Biden in a recent letter to congressional leaders, by the way, but available funds for Lebanon says about Biden's values. Karine Jean-Pierre again charged that this question was misinformation. I think misinformation is really code for, don't ask me that question because I'm not going to answer it. But is it really though? As Peter Doocy pointed out in a press briefing, you can't call a question that you don't like misinformation. That's very unfair. Now, as you guys saw in the clip, the back and forth, it went on for a while. And then all of a sudden it was abruptly ended when Karine Jean-Pierre slamming her notebook shut, storming out of the briefing room. Wow, just wow, guys. And now it looks like they're firing Karine Jean-Pierre and they're making it sound like a promotion. That's right, guys. So the headline is that Karine Jean-Pierre has just been promoted to senior advisor to the president. But the real news is this line saying that Karine Jean-Pierre will now be alongside the ranks of the president's top confidants like senior advisors Mike Donnellan, Steve Ricchetti, and Bruce Reed. So yeah, the impression that I'm getting here, guys, is that they're putting Karine Jean-Pierre in the background with these other senior advisors to babysit her. But what do you guys think? Because they can't just outright fire her at this point, right? She was the first black woman and the first openly gay person to take on the role. So them firing her for her outburst would just pretty much break the news cycle in all sorts of ways. Would she qualify as being another DEI hire? I'm just curious, guys. So yeah, instead, they tell her that she's been promoted to senior advisor with Joe Biden just really having a few months left in office. But I honestly think that we all see this for what it really is, right, guys? And as it says here, Karine Jean-Pierre will begin her new role effective immediately. I don't know, guys. That definitely sounds like she got fired. Now, they also added that she will also maintain her press secretary duties through the end of Biden's administration, but I don't know, guys. I really wouldn't be surprised when we just suddenly start seeing Karine Jean-Pierre becoming just Too busy for her press secretary appearances, if you know what I mean. Now, seriously, guys, if you want to keep hearing the truth behind these mainstream media headlines, do not hesitate. Subscribe to the channel now, tap that notification bell right afterward, and hey, you can help us get our message out to even more people by hitting the like button and sharing this video as well. Appreciate you guys. Really, guys, it is your engagement that keeps this channel going, so thank you so much. But now let's check out what's happening in Florida as Hurricane Milton is set to hit. Now, for starters, the Cockroach Bay area of Ruskin, Florida was a ghost town on Tuesday night. For the last 2 days, authorities have encouraged residents to evacuate the area. I would hate to live in an area that's called Cockroach Bay. Does anybody know why they call it that? I'm just curious. Let me know in the comments. Now, authorities have encouraged residents to evacuate the area, but if they don't have a place to go, they can stay at a nearby fortified middle school. But most residents are not putting up a fight. In fact, Hurricane Helene came through and ravaged the area, bringing floodwaters into most of their homes. People seem ready to leave. I mean, just look at the pictures. Almost every home has flood-damaged carpets, drywall, furniture, and personal effects stripped out and tossed into the front yards. Nearly 6 million Florida residents are under mandatory evacuation orders as monster storm Hurricane Milton threatens the western coast with the possibility of a once-in-a-century damage when it makes landfall with winds of 155 miles per hour or more. Now, what's really scary about these mountains of debris that's left over from Hurricane Helene is that they could pose a deadly threat when Hurricane Milton slams Florida, guys. Officials are now saying that these could become deadly missiles in treacherous hurricane force winds. So now crews are racing to remove the piles of discarded belongings and waste sites, and landfills are remaining open ahead of the Category 4 storm. Meteorologists are already warning that the monster storm could be one of the biggest hurricanes in history. Now, here's the really outrageous part here, guys. You ready for this? Some people are wondering if the federal government and the state of North Carolina, both controlled by Democrats, are slow rolling the recovery efforts in red counties with the election in mind. Conservative columnist Matt Vespa, he voiced his suspicion, saying how it's becoming more striking how the slow rollout could be due to the Democrats' intention to prevent those impacted by Helene from voting. Have you guys heard anything about that? Now, they don't say prioritize the hurricane response, but we all remember Katrina, right? You remember Hurricane Katrina, that little small hurricane that hit Louisiana back in the day? New Orleans? Yeah, that one. And the over-the-top politicization of the hurricane by the Democrat media complex against the GOP in 2005? Well, at the time, the media, and notoriously Kanye West, accused the Bush administration of foot dragging and even racism for its storm response. Though, years later, even top Democratic operative Donna Brazile praised it. But here's something to take home here, guys. President Biden said that Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been cooperative with him as Hurricane Milton nears the Sunshine State 1 day after Vice President Kamala Harris complained that Ron DeSantis didn't take her call. President Biden said he literally gave Ron DeSantis his personal phone number to call, and that every governor from Florida to North Carolina has been fully cooperative and supportive and acknowledged what the team is doing. Now, of course, Kamala Harris, on the other hand, attacked Ron DeSantis and accused him of being utterly irresponsible and selfish in not taking her call last week in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. But guess what? Ron DeSantis returned fire, basically saying he believed Kamala Harris only tried to call him to inject herself into the crisis less than a month before Election Day. More of a PR stunt from Kamala Harris versus her actually giving a damn. Now, as he said on Fox News, his focus has not been dealing with Kamala Harris. He answered back saying he saw the news report and he didn't know that she tried to contact him. But he'd also say, it's not about you, Kamala Harris. It's about the people of Florida. So his focus is exactly where it should be. He mentioned how he's worked on these hurricanes under both President Donald Trump and President Biden. Neither of them ever tried to politicize it. And you know the real truth? Now, according to Ron DeSantis, she has never called on any of the storms that they've had since she's been vice president until apparently now. So the Florida governor asked a very reasonable question. Why all of a sudden is she trying to parachute in and inject herself when she's never shown any interest in the past? We know it's because of politics. We know it's because of her campaign. In Ron DeSantis' words, I have zero time to entertain these political games. We're going to continue to do what we need to do to prepare and to respond for what may be one of the most damaging storms in the history of the United States. And honestly, guys, I think Ron DeSantis really put the vice president in her place. You know what I'm saying? He said that Kamala Harris is not even in the chain of command. She has no role in this. So the idea that he should be like worrying about her when he focused on the task at hand is quite frankly absurd for the Florida governor. Kamala just can't catch a break, can she? And it's pretty obvious that Joe Biden is still pissed off about being ousted from this race. The president is doing counter programs at every turn and is exposing the lies of the vice president. This interview with The View, it should have been a cakewalk. But nah, even with The View, she managed to screw it up. So instead, it's merely shown she's playing president for political purposes. That and to try and convince people that she's White House material. Which actually brings me to a previous video I did where I exposed even more of Kamala's lies. It's targeted toward a very key campaign promise that she's making to all of us. One that she's ready to break if she's voted into office again. Guys, make sure you check that one right after this one. As always, appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you guys next time.